Ugh. When will the torture end? I've been trapped here in my cave waiting for MLP to have its relevance again. How long am I supposed to sit here and wait for any news regarding the future of this brand? I'll even take a small breadcrumb of news, if anything. Ugh. What's the use? Why are we all here just to suffer? I can't afford to find another hyperfixation. That sound. That sound means new MLP news has dropped. And that's something I haven't said in so long that I nearly forgot what it meant. But who cares? To the computer! Alright, what we got? A live-action My Little Pony movie is in the works. Hiya fellas, welcome back to another MLP discussion that just so happens to not be an Equestria Girls review. Today we're discussing something that I've kind of been anticipating to talk about at some point, which is news regarding the future of the MLP brand. I'll be honest, I feel like I've been slowly losing a bit of interest in this series lately since there's really nothing to do but rewatch episodes of FIM or EG movies / specials. And before you loons start cheering about the possibility of me talking about MLP less frequently, sit your asses down, cause that for sure won't be the case. If I want to talk about the franchise again, I'll do it, but it of course won't be the only thing I make videos on. Thank gosh. If you somehow couldn't tell from the skit you just saw, I brought up how there has been a lack of updates regarding on where the franchise will go moving forward. Eventually, we did get something that may or may not be official since it came from this Twitter account, and that something is a live-action movie being in development by Hasbro Entertainment and Amazon MGM Studios. I'm not sure who exactly asked for this, but what I do know is that I better not hear a single complaint coming out of their mouth if it ends up being a slop movie. What's crazy is that we've reached a point where we shouldn't even bother asking why this needs to be a thing, since it's way too obvious.
Money, oh money, how I love thee.
Aside from that, animated characters heading to live action is admittedly the least of our worries now, so long as it's not AI generated. I guess you're assuming I'm gonna jump on the hate train and rant about how awful of an idea this is, right? Well, here's the thing. I don't really care if it's gonna be good or not. We've seen so many live-action versions of animated characters at this point, and I've lost track of how many were hits or misses. Although calling every movie that uses this trope a cheap cash grab is a bit harsh. I mean, come on. We've had the Sonic movies, the Chipmunk movies, the Garfield movies, Smurfs, and, okay, I see your point. Excuses aside, the tired argument that live-action adaptations of animated characters are inherently worthless, it's simply not resonating anymore. The world has moved on, and frankly, that opinion is just going to be met with a collective shrug. The trend of no joy or whimsy had died out centuries ago. Even if you hate Sonic or are a typical Sonic fan that loves being a buzzkill, you gotta give credit and a good old pat on the back to the movies for the accomplishments and introducing a bunch of new audiences to the franchise. Especially since they're literally the most well-performed pieces of media to come out of the franchise. Oh, by the way, I will never be convinced that the Sonic design fiasco wasn't done on purpose to create hype for the movie. I might just have to talk about live-action cartoon adaptations done right in a separate video, but to keep it short, it's totally possible if companies actually cared, which they usually don't. Okay, enough about my ramblings on defective critics, let's dive into why you're actually here. So, how can a live-action My Little Pony movie work if it were not to include a bunch of meme material or jabbing at the infamous community it spawned? Well, the thing about that is, you can't. But that didn't stop them from trying, of course! When we dive into movies like Garfield 1 and 2, the Chipmunk Saga, or even Sonic's Adventures, we can't just always dismiss them as pure fantasy. These franchises, believe it or not, are grounded in a relatable reality in one or two instances. Think about it. Garfield, Alvin, Simon, Theodore, and Sonic have all had significant interactions with us humans before, so it's far from out of the ordinary. Now back to MLP. Seriously, take a glance at any of the past TV shows or movies. Isn't it obvious how much they deliberately avoid anything resembling real life? It's clear as day. along with the obvious fact that this being the direction they're planning to go in after the success of what they've done after G4's conclusion. Pony life was a thing that happens when you let a brony let loose with their MLP fanfiction, and G5 is what happens when you leave something in the oven for too long and end up being let down with the results. Now, look, I didn't hate it or anything, but G5 just had no real appeal on me since it's difficult to try and make something more impressive than what came before, obviously. And trust me, it's totally not because the 3D animation was more than enough to throw me off, just like how everyone, even folks outside the fandom, felt. Hasbro's commitment to MLP, demonstrated by their live-action project consideration despite the franchise's current dormant state, is truly remarkable and deserves our support. To an extent, I could somewhat understand if they hardly want anything to do with it now after the infamous cult following the series started that I guarantee they did not see coming. As for info regarding the movie itself, there's little to nothing to go off of since, as expected, this is a rumor, which means it may or may not be 100% accurate. I even tried reading the article word for word until I reached this part, which, as you can imagine, is where I gave up on it. A good chunk of the article doesn't even talk about MLP, which validates my statement of there not being much statistics to go off of. So yeah, basically dodged a bullet. A bullet from a Nerf gun, that is. My main point is that for a series that is well known for its colorful cast of characters and a bright and vibrant world filled with lore, have fun making that work in live action. I do sort of find it amusing how the studio behind Tom and Jerry and the Pink Panther is working on it. Speaking of which, the Pink Panther also had a movie that was live action, which baited many people into thinking he'd actually show up in the movie. But nope, it's the name of the diamond. Can you picture them doing something like that with the Pony movie? While the premise seems laughably absurd, a live-action Equestria Girls adaptation, I think, holds immense potential since, you know, they're actually human. Like, come on, dude, it was right there! Even if the movie itself will feature humans, which you'd be stupid for thinking they wouldn't, it's not going to be a shock to the 80s bronies since MLP has featured humans coexisting with the horses themselves. Yeah, you heard me right, EG lovers. As for how the plot will turn out, I can already envision how tired and stale it'll be. Is Hasbro phoning it in from Smurf Village or Green Hill this time? Place your bets. If young me were to find out about this news, you'd hear me ranting for days on end, even without being a fan. But at this point, I'm left with feeling, sure, why not? Well, one thing's for sure though, no one, and I mean no one, is gonna go into this film expecting a good movie or even a masterpiece. Especially since we have this, which isn't even a masterpiece either, but will probably be considered one after this movie presumably fumbles. Even if this movie ends up being dog water, I'm hoping for it to at least be a so bad that it's good, or funny scenario, as that would be better than just being bored the whole way through. But anyway, what are your thoughts on this, even though I doubt they're any different than mine? We'll see what happens whenever Hasbro decides to put Transformers and Peppa Pig aside for a few minutes so they can share more details. With that said, thank you all so much for watching, and be sure to comment, like, and subscribe for more. Now, if anyone needs me, I'm off to patiently await Equestria Girls' glorious return, or at least a decent burial so I don't have to resemble a fool for still caring. Farewell.